Welcome, everybody, to Live from the Field Forest Restoration. It sounds like everyone can hear me, but would somebody please type in just so I know? Perfect. All right, welcome. Today, we are going to be learning all about forest restoration and about cutting edge research and teaching strategies taking place in tropical forests spanning two continents. My name is Carrie Winninger with Sonoma State University's Center for Environmental Inquiry. You can learn more about us at cei.sonoma.edu. These events are supported by the Organization of Biological Field Stations, OBFS, and I am thrilled to announce that this is the first of 4 special Live from the Field events taking place in collaboration with the Ocelots Network, online content for experiential learning of tropical systems. For instructors in the audience, be sure to take a look at the document that I will be pasting in the chat called Ocelots Module and Implementation Plan Links and Pre-Event Reading. And please also visit thevirtualfield.org to view past events and access other virtual learning experiences for college students created at field stations and marine laboratories worldwide. Here are some guidelines for the webinar. All participants are muted and your video cameras are off, and they're going to stay that way. Please use the chat button to communicate with us during the event, and remember to choose all participants and attendees so everybody will see your comments. Now, when you have questions for the researchers and professors, use the Q&A button. This doesn't often appear in Zoom meetings, so it might be not familiar to you. If you're here as part of a college class, it's important to make sure your full name is visible so you receive attendance credit. So please make sure it either appears as your username or you type a question in and sign it with your name. It's also helpful if you write the word student before your question, and then we can prioritize your questions over other people's. All right. We are fortunate today to have as our moderator someone with a foot in both the field and education worlds. Dr. Brittany Cavazos is an assistant professor of biology at Stonehill College in Massachusetts. In addition to 3 years of undergraduate biology education at Stonehill College, where she implemented her own adaptation of an ocelots module, Brittany did her graduate research in tropical plant ecology, conducting work in Guam and the Mariana Islands, and on the Big Island in Hawaii. Without further ado, I'll turn this over to Brittany.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Carrie. And thank you all for joining us. We welcome classes, faculty, and other participants in this very exciting Live from the Field event series, where we'll take you on virtual field trips to research sites around the world. So today, you'll see in each event, we virtually visit with professionals at 3 different locations. In this case, in our special event, we're doing 2 field researchers and 1 university professor. Live from the Field events are a project of the Virtual Field, which is an international coalition of over 50 field stations and marine laboratories. Other virtual learning experiences help college students build observation, communication, questioning, and data analytical skills through the use of 360-degree videos, underwater film, and more. Learn more at thevirtualfield.org, and Carrie will go ahead and paste that in the chat. So, as Carrie mentioned, this particular Live from the Field event has been developed in close collaboration with the Ocelots Network. This network brings together researchers, active learning pedagogy specialists, software developers, media specialists, all together to create an open access online resource library of learning modules in tropical biology specifically. The goal of these modules is to spark excitement in undergraduate courses by broadening both the cultural and geographical perspectives, enhancing principle-based reasoning and quantitative skills, and also challenging and changing the way that students learn biology in the classroom. You can learn more about ocelots specifically at ocelots.nrem.iastate.edu, and that will also get put in the chat. Okay, so today, like Carrie mentioned, we're looking at this intersection of forest restoration fieldwork and education. And we're talking both to folks that are on the ground collecting the data and educators that are bringing that data into classrooms through these Ocelot modules. Speaking from my own experience as a biology instructor, biology classrooms tend to focus more on big picture processes and vocabulary and cramming in those learning objectives. And we miss a lot of times getting to expose students to what I think is the actual fun part of biology, and the part that will hook their attention and foster their future interest in the field. Forest restoration ties together not only major topics in biology, but it's interdisciplinary in nature, and I'm hoping we'll see that today. And it can get us thinking about the bigger picture and why what we're learning actually matters. I became involved with ocelots last summer because, in part, because of my experience and love of tropical biology. Even back to my undergrad days when I had my first field experience in the tropics, studying abroad in Ecuador. Not all people have the privilege to do that, at least not early in their career. So bringing these tropical forest ecology modules into the classroom for folks who haven't sometimes even traveled outside of the state is a great way to, like, one, gain student buy-in and interest, and expose students to areas of biology they maybe didn't even know that they would be interested in. These types of learning modules humanize scientists and celebrate the collaboration in research all over the world. So I'm excited to moderate this session of Live from the Field today, featuring 3 teams of biologists, 2 who created modules based off of their research, and 1 who implemented a module in the classroom with his students. Each team has prepared an 8-minute video describing their work and experience. And then after the videos, they will all be able to answer your questions that you have, and we'll do that live. I encourage everyone to post your questions in the Q&A, not the chat. Post the questions in the Q&A as we go along while you think of them during the videos. And then myself and Carrie will sort of gather them up and ask them out loud to the presenters after all videos have played. If you're a student, remember to include that you're a student in the question, because we'll prioritize your questions first. Okay. So to begin our journey, we'll start at Las Cruces Biological Station in Costa Rica, a research station of the OTS, or Organization for Tropical Studies, where Doctors Zach Zahawi and Miriam San Jose from the Charles Darwin Foundation conducted research that led to the creation of the Ocelots module with the title, Restoring Tropical Forest. Is planting clusters of trees a cost-effective and ecologically sound strategy to restore tropical forest? This was authored by Zach and Karen Hall from the University of California, Santa Cruz. This work highlights that forest restoration is complex, and it highlights frugivores, or animals that disperse seeds, as a key part of that process of restoration, which is an often overlooked mutualistic interaction. Zach and Miriam have decades of experience working in this system and have worked with landowners as well to find the most effective ways to restore these forests. So let's see what they have to say.
Hello, everybody. My name is Rakan Zahawi. Many call me Zach. I'm the executive director of the Charles Darwin Foundation, which is based in the Galapagos Islands. I have a PhD in plant ecology from the University of Illinois, and I'm a forest restoration ecologist. I was also inspired when I was at the university. I was at the University of Texas for my undergraduate. And Linda Escobar was a faculty at the time. She was a botanist, Colombian botanist who really got me interested in plants and in their conservation, their value, and their importance to the health of ecosystems and the world around us. So the question of what I do in my job, the majority of the time I do a lot of administrative work. As an executive director at the Charles Darwin Foundation, there's a lot of programs and research that's going on there, and I oversee the management and raise funds for the foundation. Here on the ground, I do research on forest recovery, and Miriam's going to talk to you more about that.
Hello, my name is Miriam San Jose. I am a researcher at Charles Darwin Foundation, and I have a PhD in biology. My advisor at my bachelor's, he encouraged me to pursue this career. So he was a very important person to me. His name is Dr. Zenon Cano Santana. I started as a postdoc in this project. My main focus is on the seed rain.
This study evolved out of a series of prior studies. This is a research project I established with my main collaborator, Karen Hole, who's based at the University of California in Santa Cruz. And together we came up with this research framework, if you will, and applied it in southern Costa Rica 20 years ago or so. And the question comes out of how much intervention do you need to put into a system to get the process of recovery started? High intervention, intermediate intervention, or low to no intervention. The idea being that the less you need to do, the more efficient it is, the less costly it is. And so if you look back, you'll see some trees that are in bloom with orange flowers. There's maybe 4 in a row in the center of your image there. Immediately to the left of that, you see a square patch of very similar forest. That's one of our treatments. There's another treatment where you see all the orange blooms, and then to the right of that is a third treatment. So this strip in this agricultural landscape is evaluating 3 different kinds of restoration treatments, basically letting a system recover naturally without any intervention, just stopping the grazing and stopping the active disturbance, planting in the entire area with a subset of tree species. That's what you see on the left-hand side. And then on the right, it almost looks the same, but it actually isn't. There we only planted in patches, in a few little patches of trees, only about a quarter of the number of trees that were planted in the uniform plantation were planted in that site. And so this is one site of around 12 or 13 sites that we've had over the course of this 20-year project. This is one of the trees that we planted to set up this study. So this tree was about this tall, maybe this big in diameter 20 years ago, and this is what it is today. So trees in the tropics can grow very, very fast, because I can barely get my arms around this. I can just about touch it. So right now we're in what is one of those patches of trees that were planted in the island treatment. It's a 1 meter squared area, and within this area we take a variety of measurements. We measure everything that's taller than 20 centimeters, so that's about that tall from the ground. So if I dig around here, what I'm going to find, or what I hope I'm going to find, is this. This is a tag, and this tag will give me the identifying information on this seedling. There'll also be some taller things. So in the background here, you can see bigger seedlings or saplings at this point that are going to be too hard to take height measurements for. These we're going to measure with calipers. So we have these handy dandy little tools here that you just take you put it around the seedling, make sure everybody can see, or the sapling in this case. You wrap it around the tree itself, and then it gives you the measurement of the diameter of that sapling. And in this case, it's 1.8 centimeters in diameter. Same thing with this bigger one. You can see there's a tag on this, a permanent tag. And so that's the identifying number for this tree, and we can monitor it over time. And Miriam will tell you more about how we, the step prior to this, which is seed rain.
So to measure seed rain, we use these seed traps. In this case, it's a squared seed trap made with a mesh. So we can measure and we can collect all the seeds that are over 1 millimeter long. And then all the small things, you're going to take it and go to the laboratory to separate all the seeds and then identify those seeds. But where the seed rain comes from? Well, it comes from the trees that are around, but also most of them are dispersed. And in tropical forests, most of the dispersed seeds are dispersed by animals. In this case, birds are very, very important in these ecosystems for seed dispersal. So in this project, we also study the birds that are in our restoration plots.
The patchy planting or the island treatment is at least as effective as the plantation. So even if we're talking that they're the same, and they're not, some cases the island system's better, in other cases the plantation is better, that equivalency overall means that you can use that treatment in many places and save considerably on cost of planting and perhaps restore a bigger area. You always set something up with a particular set of ideas and goals in mind, and then you start realizing that in some cases the questions or the treatments that you've applied don't allow you to answer those questions. We've had many master's students, we've had many PhD students, we've had a few postdocs working with us. There are many listservs out there that are requesting assistance. Some of them are even cover all your expenses. So these experiences are incredibly invaluable. So be on the lookout on these web listings. There are many of them. There are lots of opportunities out there.
Awesome. Okay, so now we are going to take a trip to the Big Island of Hawaii, where Becky Ostertag and Emma Steerhoff will speak about their research with the University of Hawaii at Hilo. That is covered in the Ocelots module I'm most familiar with, titled Functional Trait-Based Restoration: Can Hybrid Restoration Enhance Invasion Resistance and Ecosystem Services? This module is authored by Becky and by Nicole DeMano of Oregon State University. The lowland wet forests of Hawaii are really special ecosystems, both biologically and bioculturally. I had the honor actually of seeing these forests during my time on the Big Island during some grad work, and gained a huge appreciation for the way that these researchers do science, being super mindful of their purpose and their impact. And I think these researchers specifically serve as a great example of how best to integrate Indigenous cultures and practices into what they do in a respectful way.
Liguna pilina is a hybrid forest restoration experiment located in the lowland wet forests of Hilo, Hawaii. By incorporating both native plants and introduced non-invasive plants, we aim to establish a functional forest that is more resilient against invasive species. Our name translates to budding new relationships in Hawaiian, alluding to how we can find new partnerships between plants that may not have grown all together before.
One of the reasons that we started working in this area is because lowland wet forests in Hawaii Islands were kind of ignored. Most of the people that wanted to do ecology work were working in the higher elevation habitats, which were dominated still by mostly native species, and the forests were in better condition. But we realized that these low elevation forests still have native species, but it's been declining in this kind of habitat because of invasion of many pioneer species that are fast growing. And we see this especially in the lowland wet forests. We had been working here since 2002, and a previous research and other experiments had shown that the native species did not really have seedlings in this forest. Mostly because we got them choked out by fast growing pioneer species that created a combination of the dark conditions, the lots of nutrients, and the impediments of the physical leaf litter. Early work showed that if we put in all the effort to just remove the invasives, they just come back. We estimated that to keep a 1 meter square area free of weeds in a year period would take 40 hours of work. And so when you scale that up on a larger scale, it's just way too much effort and cost to be able to keep these forests free of weeds. So we realized maybe we need to do some clearing and then do some planting of species that we desired. And we chose an approach to plant species with functional traits that would help manipulate the light environment to be sort of the Goldilocks environment, where the light environment would be not too dark and not too light. Too light will be too many weeds, too dark, not enough native regeneration. To do that, we used a combination of native species, which we knew could grow down in these eastern Hawaiian forests, and some non-native species that were deemed not invasive based on weed risk assessments and our personal knowledge. And we used functional trait theory to get a lot of data on things like wood density, leaf nitrogen, leaf phosphorus, photosynthesis rate, water use efficiency, seed size, and getting all of those traits together. We had 15 traits in total. We were able to look at the species and see what would be an appropriate species for this kind of habitat. Some of the species that we knew that were these highly weedy, fast-growing pioneer species were on the fast end of what's called the plant economics spectrum. They grow fast, they reproduce fast, they produce litter with high nutrient concentration that cycles very quickly. And we knew we needed to slow down the nutrient cycle because Hawaiian plants that were native to here evolved in this habitat basically on this rocky substrate right here, and which is very low nutrients. So adding extra nutrients didn't really favor the native plants, it disadvantaged them. So we needed to do strategies that would decrease the rate of nutrient cycling. So we chose plants that we categorized as slow in terms of the rate of carbon and nutrient cycling, species that grew really slowly, that had thick leaves, low nutrient concentrations. This tala would be an example of a slow kind of plant. Or species that weren't quite as slow, but were not on that fast end of the spectrum. And we called those species moderate. So within our treatments, we chose core species that would either be slow or moderate. Each treatment, we would choose 4 core species. So in our slow treatment, we had 4 core species that we used, 2 native and 2 non-native. And then we added additional 6 species. And in one of those treatments, we added species that were more redundant to those core species. They were more similar in their traits using a technique called principal components analysis, added species to the core that showed, based on our functional trait analysis, that they were more complementary in trait space. So they filled up other parts of the trait axis. They were more different than those 4 core. And then we chose species that on the other side that had the four core, but we chose species that were more redundant in their set of traits. They were more like, all the species were more similar to each other on the team. So the team had more similar roles. So we have the slow complementary, the slow redundant, and then we do that also for the moderate treatment. So we have moderate complementary and moderate redundant. And we have all four of those treatments. Each has 10 species, but they differ in their combination of functional traits. So we look at them like a team, all the species working together, and we want to see which ones, under what conditions do the species work best. And we do lots of measurements on growth of everything we planted, and all the existing trees that were there that were native.
We also monitor seedling regeneration each year, so we'll look at meter-squared quadrats along a transect and count any seedlings that would have come from outplanted species or existing species in our plots.
Each month we come out and collect the leaf litter from these trays. We take it back to the lab. We dry them out to remove any moisture from the leaves. Then we sort them and grind them, and we send them off to another lab to analyze the nutrient content of each of the leaves.
Another thing we do each year in these plots is pull out weeds that are emerging of invasive plants, and then we track how many hours it takes to remove the weeds from each plot. And so that way we can track how much the plots have improved in terms of their resistance to invasive plants. As weeding time goes down, that means the plots are becoming more resistant.
We measured phenology, what's flowering and fruiting every month. At one point, we measured the amount of seed rain coming down. Every once in a while, the soil nutrients. Try to get a pulse on the health of the forest and how it's doing across these 4 different treatments or plant combinations.
Although the results vary by treatment, we found that overall our treatment plots have lower nutrient cycling and greater native seedling recruitment compared to our control plots. It's been amazing to see how these native and introduced plants can work together and build new relationships, or kavina, to establish a functional forest.
All right. So our last stop takes us around the world in Jakarta, Indonesia, where Professor Akbar Reza at Universitas Gadjah Mada used Zach and Miriam's module in the classroom with his undergrad biology students, and then authored an implementation plan for instructors who'd like to use that same module in the future, with some teaching notes and recommendations and such. So this video is a little bit different, focusing on the educational experience of students. And I just want to note that these Ocelots modules are incredibly versatile in nature. They could be implemented in a single day, or expanded into multiple weeks, like in a semester, giving students a chance to think really critically and deeply about content and to generate really impressive discussions and products.
Hi everyone, my name is Akbar Reza and I'm junior lecturer at the Faculty of Biology, Universitas Gadjah Mada, Indonesia. I teach introductory level for ecology and upper level and graduate level for marine ecology. I love being a lecturer because first, I love teaching, second, I love nature. And for me, meeting a diverse new students means always constantly learning and adapting every year. My undergraduate mentors and friends had a huge impact on me. So as a first generation student and live far away from my hometown, it's not always easy. I lack of confidence and financial support, but they always support me. One of the life-changing moments is when I applied for scholarship and I had no prior experience on it, but they always push me hard. And finally I got the scholarship. And that experience taught me that supportive environment is very important to our career. Yes, I actively engage in research related to human-environment interdependence and conservation planning. For me, research is fun because there is always new questions, and at the end of the research, the new questions always emerge. Research also teach me beyond science, like time management, teamwork, budgeting, even a conflict management. I think that experience is very important to bring into the classrooms. The model's comparisons of forest restoration strategy is very relevant with Indonesia because forest degradation is a pressing issue, and currently there are a lot of restoration activities and initiatives in Indonesia, and the model helps you realize that different strategy will have a different results depend on ecological and social context. The model explained that the cost-effective and less intensive approach like tree nucleations, applied nucleation or tree cluster can lead to similar or even better results compared to conventional plantation in some aspects. However, in our regions, plantations combined with community-based is the most favored one because the intensive nature of plantations creates job opportunities. And the fruits from the plantations also an economical benefit for the locals. So while protecting and restoring the forest, they also gain economical benefit. The major shift is that students realize that restoration project is not solely about ecological project, but there are a lot of socio-economic considerations. So they start thinking, integrating ecological context and social context. In the class, we use different approaches like mind map to visualize the idea and sharing the arguments through discussions. To make the content more contextual and relatable, I add several examples of restoration initiatives from several places in Indonesia. For example, there are small villages that live in the margin of the forest that actively engage in restoration and protection of the forest through coffee agroforestry and ecotourism, particularly primate observations and cultural activities. Students become more exposed with holistic approach and transdisciplinary thinking. I use role-play activities to broaden their perspectives. So some students learn to become a local village, some students become the NGO, someone become the mining company. So they learn many perspectives, and I also want to enhance their empathy and compassion with various stakeholders with various interests. And I believe this mindset will prepare students to tackle the real-world problem that also need a holistic and integrative approach. What really surprised students is how the researcher can secure 15 years of land and communicating them with the landowners, because it's not always easy to socially acceptable. So it teach them that research is not only about the science itself, but also how to build a trust and how to communicate our intentions of the research. I think the most thought-provoking concept in the model is the non-linearity or the uncertainty. So I just remember the model discussed about the ideal tree cluster size, and it turns out after 5 years, it's very difficult to compare between size because there are a lot of varieties. So was it a failure? No, it's a part of the research and how we adapt with that situations. The model helped the student to learn that research is not always straightforward. There are a lot of opportunities that maybe go beyond our expectations, whether it's good or bad. But that's an iterative process of the research itself. And adaptability is the key, not only key for scientific skills, but key for surviving skills. I think the most important thing is they now learn that research need a lot of considerations apart from a good research question, a very solid design sampling or design, how good executions, but also a lot of aspect like socio-economic consideration, social aspect, maybe conflict management. So there are a lot of story, I think, behind the research itself. And at the end of the day, the students really enjoy the model adaptations because it brings the research into the classroom, bring the 15 years experience into a lot of activities, which is great experience for the students.
Okay, everyone. Now it's time for your questions for the panelists. Please post questions for the presenters using the Q&A button and not the chat. Our college classes have a time constraint of about 50 minutes, so we'll prioritize those questions first. And then after that, we'll answer questions for about another 10 minutes. Panelists, as a reminder, are going to try to keep their answers to about a minute or less so we can get through as many of these questions as possible.
All right. So if all of the panelists want to turn on your video and audio, see all your lovely faces after we've seen those incredible videos. I just wanted to start with the question for everybody. So we'll keep this one to less than 30 seconds. And I think I'm going to go in the order that we saw the videos. So we'll start with Zach, then Miriam, followed by Becky, then Emma, and finish up with Akbar. So the first question, can you either tell us or remind us what drew you to field research and forest biology in the first place?
Sure. Well, thank you. Thank you for that question. Really what drew me to I've always been interested in the field. My mother was an archaeologist, and so she was always taking me out into the middle of nowhere, but I went the slightly different direction in biology, and my inspiration came from a botanist who I took a course with when I was an undergraduate student.
Well, yeah, that's a good question. And I guess since I was a child, I was always amazed by nature and animals, and I was always picking up every lizard that I saw. So yeah, that part really engaged me, no, to see how diverse is our world, no? So tropical forests being the most diverse ecosystems definitely engaged me, no, into that kind of research.
Yeah, I would say I grew up in Chicago in a big city, and I never felt like my place. It never felt like home. My family would see the skyscrapers and the lights and say, "Oh, isn't that beautiful?" And I'd be like, "No, all the habitat that used to be here, that's what was beautiful." So I think it was a product of seeing worlds around me that were different than the nature I wanted to see.
Hi. Well, I grew up watching a lot of documentaries, animals, plants, but I never experienced the real situation until I studied my undergraduate as to biology. So that's the first time bring the experience that what the nature is, and it's really lead me to my career today that works mostly on the nature.
For me, I was always really loving being outside and getting to know the critters I was around. And most of my work has been with birds in the past. I started doing avian research as an undergraduate, and then that's what brought me to grad school here in Hawaii. But through doing research on the birds here and being in these forests, I really fell in love with them and grew to want to protect them as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all your answers. I'm going to ask, first direct this question at Becky, and then anybody else who wants to join can chime in. And it's sort of a two-part question that ties into each other. So in my sort of intro of the Hawaii video mentioned the sort of biocultural importance. And so I was wondering if you could sort of define what a biocultural approach to restoration means. And then also, that I think ties really nicely into this next question, which is, what is the best way to work alongside with communities and Indigenous people you plan to do research with, like, without imposing harmful practices?
Okay, great. And I also see that there was an earlier student question, what does biocultural mean? So I think we're hitting all this together. The biocultural approach to restoration would be acknowledging that it's not just scientists that are doing the restoration, it's people that are doing the restoration. And that involves bringing the community, the people that live there, the people that are part of those ecosystems as part of it. And they may have certain wants or needs in a restoration area that maybe aren't always what the scientists would think about. They might prefer to have certain plants. They might seem to favor other species than you would want there. But to bring those communities in means listening to them, going in with an open mind, not having one set of ways to do it, but know that there's multiple ways to do it. Know that you may want to incorporate ceremony, like in Hawaii, we often do an oli or a chant before we go to a site to ask permission. We might have certain things that people ask to do around specific kinds of plants because that's part of their cultural tradition. So having an open mind and incorporating all of those things is, I see, one of the ways to do biocultural restoration and work together as a community, listening, bringing people in, have meetings with the community members, and bring in as broad a perspective as possible towards the work.
Amazing answer. Thank you so much, Becky. This next question is from a student, and it's directed towards the researchers in Costa Rica. And they're wondering about the planting patches and if you're using one species or planting a diversity, and maybe if you could expand on how you choose what to plant.
Yeah, that's a great question. We planted 4 species, the same 4 species in the 2 planting treatments, equal spacing, so the density didn't change, but in the patches, we obviously only planted a certain portion of the area. The species, so this is 2004, 2005, and when we got the funding, we were really pressed for species selection, and so we went with what was largely available in the nurseries. And so if you asked me today to repeat the experiment, I would probably choose different species. 2 of the species that we chose are wind dispersed, and a real important consideration in restoration today is thinking about species that have a broader dispersal network that can attract frugivores, that will bring in other seeds from different areas. And so when you plant wind dispersed species, the only attraction there is the structure of the trees. I think that was all the question. Did I miss something?
That was perfect. Thank you so much for that. And I think Brittany has another question she's going to direct.
Yes. So this, anybody could jump in to answer this one, but in both of the forest restoration examples, they seemed relatively isolated, maybe. And the student question asks, have there been different strategies, like restoration strategies, depending on human settlement, like proximity to population centers, degree of urbanization, economic development, or how remote the location is?
I could take this one. So our hybrid restoration approach is largely in response to heavy anthropogenic change in this area. We're located right by the Hilo airport on a military base, and so it's been a heavily deforested and invaded area. So In higher elevation areas that are more remote, restoration to a completely native forest is still possible because it's still native dominant despite the presence of invasive species. Whereas this site, when Becky began the project, was completely overgrown with all these invasive plants. And the native plants that were there were not reproducing at all. And so there was no sustainability to that forest. So using this hybrid approach of incorporating non-invasive, non-native plants, like a lot of canoe plants, which again, these are Polynesian introductions, so that plays into that biocultural element as well, creates a forest that is faster growing than our native plants would be on their own because they are very slow growing and can kind of help it compete with these invasive plants in that area.
So it looks like some of our college classes are needing to leave, which makes sense. This event goes by so quickly. So I'm actually going to let them know that we are so appreciative that you've joined us. We're going to keep going until the top of the hour, I guess it is, and we'll continue on with the presenters. But students and faculty who do need to leave now, please keep an eye out for an email. We'll be sending a couple different survey links that are really important for you to take, one for students, one for faculty. So please do keep an eye out, and we will be recording this for the future. So sorry, I took that piece of your script, Brittany, but I'm going to go ahead with the next question as well. Okay. So this is a really interesting question, and I admit I don't have the full context for it, so I'm going to read it directly. So this is for Akbar. Trihita Karana emphasizes harmony between people, Pawangan, nature, Pelimahan, and the spiritual, Parhahayangan. Do you think this philosophy could serve as a model for forest restoration efforts? For instance, in areas like Munduk, where clove monoculture has reduced biodiversity, how might you promote ecological balance while engaging and supporting the local community in a meaningful way?
Right, that's a very interesting question. I never expect the questions. So Tritakara is the philosophy from local people, especially at the Bali, um, generated from Hindu perspectives. So basically, it's quite similar with Becky regarding the biocultural. So how we integrate the local ecological knowledge, how they um, faith also involved in their life. So yes, definitely, that philosophy is very important because let's say in Bali, some people really a sacred area for the tree, and they sometimes cover the tree with sacred cloth, I mean fabric. So that part of the ecological knowledge, local belief is very important to enhance the successful restoration effort. Yes, and regarding uh, uh, monoculture uh, biodiversity, like a clove in Bali. So maybe yeah, it's quite challenging, but the way to engage people to aware regarding biodiversity is to put several trees that have a ecological function in the barrier of the monoculture area. It's like a like some mix patch. So in the margin of the monoculture area, some NGOs suggest to put several trees to bring a shade and also bring a birds to provide ecological benefits like pest control and etc. etc.
Great. Thank you so much, Akbar. This next question is another student question. I'm going to ask Miriam to tackle this first. What were the results of the study in Costa Rica? Which method of restoration was the most cost-effective and with the best results?
Good question. Yeah. So at the end, what we have seen is that the island treatment, this is planting in patches, and also the plantation, both have similar levels of diversity, you know. But of course, planting just patches, it's economically and effortly more less expensive, no? So what is very interesting about this project is that it's demonstrating that if your goal in the restoration is to get the tropical diversity that you have in these sites, you don't need to do like a whole plantation. You can save resources by just planting islands or patches of trees, and those patches that resemble how the natural regeneration in this forest occur, those patches will start growing and merging between themselves. So at the end, the result is that islands or planting patches of trees, it's better.
Thank you so much for that answer. Let's see, we really only have time for one or two quick more questions. So I think I'll ask if anybody has something that comes to mind right away. Are any of you planning on expanding your research in a different direction? And what is that direction? Just throw a hand up if you are. Okay, Zach.
Sure. So one of the big questions we didn't ask in the study in Costa Rica, which I think is a really interesting one, one was island size, which we've more or less figured that question out. But the other really big piece of this, when you want to talk about scaling up, is how far apart do you plant these? Do you put them 5 meters apart? Do you put them 10 meters apart, 30 meters apart? And obviously that has big implications for scaling up what you do on the ground. And so in Ecuador, we have that experimental design set up where we planted the same size islands at 10, 20, and 30 meter spacing. This is a huge area that you're having to cover in order to sort of really assess this question properly. And I think that's a really important piece of this puzzle that we need to answer.
Anybody else have something they want to continue on based on their current work? That's fine too. Glad you're happy with what's going on. All right, I think Brittany has one more question for us.
I do. So one more question. I think it would be great if everybody could just give a quick answer to this. And we'll end on a positive note. But my question to the panelists is, what is the most rewarding thing about your experience in field research?
Maybe we'll go in the same order. Yeah, go ahead, Becky, and then we can go in the same order from the beginning.
It's changed over the years, but I would say in my current job as a professor, for me, it's like working with the students and mentoring them and seeing them get excited and learn that they actually could do this for a living and be outside and see them get passionate about this kind of work. That, for me, really makes me happy.
It feels a little on the nose since our title literally has the Hawaiian word for relationship in it, but just seeing relationships form between people in the forests, between plants that may not have coexisted together before. I actually have in my background here an ia, which is a native vine, and it's growing up an ulu tree, which is an introduced plant by the Polynesians. So seeing those new relationships form, and also seeing people come into the forest and engage with that space and get really excited about our plants is really awesome.
To me, the more rewarding thing is to see that where there was just like this desert of grasses, then you have this beautiful full forest that it's occurring right there in the same area where there was like very few things growing, no? And the animals also start coming back. And so to see that change, I agree with Becky. It's like really, really amazing. And the other part that I found that is very amazing of this field is that I think, and I can see that there is more and more people interested in this area, no? Which is very much needed, and it keeps the hope turned on, no?
Super. Well, I'd second all those comments and add that it sounds selfish, but it's not meant to be that way. But when I go into the field, you're once again inspired. I spend so much time in offices that you're reminded again, oh yeah, this is why I went into biology, and that inspiration that then motivates you to keep doing this kind of work, because being out in the field is very, to use a redundant word here, restorative, and so that's a really important part of it. But I also think that watching a system evolve over a long period of time, and I always said in this study from the very beginning that the most interesting questions come later. We all know what happens in the first few years, but how these systems evolve 20, 30, 40 years later, which we're not there yet, but is really fascinating to me, and that's really inspiring.
Yeah, like Becky said, as a lecturer, I always feel like a marathon. I mean, pass down the spirit to the next generations, and also it's very great experience to see now more people aware that our well-being is related to our healthy ecosystems.
Amazing answers. Thank you all so much. A huge thank you to our presenters, Zach Zahawi, Miriam San Jose, Becky Ostertag, Emma Stierhoff, and Akbar Reza. We also want to thank the Organization of Biological Field Stations, the Ocelots Network, the Center for Environmental Inquiry at Sonoma State University. Don't forget to learn all about the amazing things these organizations are doing at the links that Carrie is pasting in the chat now. And lastly, thanks to the National Science Foundation for supporting several aspects of this work, and to all the wonderful people behind the scenes that made it possible. In the next few days, we will be emailing all of you to follow up with answers to questions that we didn't get to. We'll give you a link to the recording of this event and a link to a survey. There will be one very short survey that we're asking students to take, and many of the faculty members here have already received consent forms for a longer survey that we really hope you'll take the time to fill out. Thank you in advance for this. It's an important way of tracking and assessing the success of these events, as well as to improve them. We hope to see you at future Live from the Field events currently being planned for fall 2025 and beyond. Dates and titles for these will be posted on the websites mentioned before by August. Please share all of these with fellow instructors, students, friends, colleagues. Thank you, and goodbye from the field. Panelists, please wave goodbye.